Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. Today's guest is one of the most experienced figures in elite sports medicine. Dave Fevre is a chartered physiotherapist who has worked at the highest level of professional sport for over 30 years, including Manchester United's treble-winning team, Blackburn Rovers, Burnley, Chelsea, Leicester City and Manchester City in the WSL. He has helped shape how injuries are treated, how players return to performance, and how medical teams operate in some of the most demanding environments in sport. From Lancashire County Cricket Club in 1985 to Rugby League, the Premier League and beyond, Dave has spent decades at the forefront of injury rehabilitation and elite player care. In this first part, we explore Dave's journey into elite sport, what sports medicine used to look like, and what really goes on behind the physio room door. Dave, welcome to Strain on the Game. It's great to have you on.
Wally, nice to see you again, mate. And Lamb Dog as always.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on. This
no
is
problem, mate. Anytime.
something that we've been really excited. We've had some magnificent guests on so far talking about their careers and what they've done, but yours is arguably one of the most exciting careers that
I don't know about that.
Why? Why not?
No, it's just the
This
way.
this is
It's like a lot
typical
of
of you
things.
downplaying things.
Yeah, but it's the imposter syndrome when you're in the right place at the right time. I think there's a lot of that, and it's just one of them things. It's the way I am, mate. You know what I'm like.
Yeah. So we'll get straight into it.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that one of the things we have to talk about is your early career and what sports medicine looked like when you first started as to what it looks like now.
Yeah. I've been really, just to cut long story, I wanted to be a PE teacher. That was my original aim and never made it. At that time, Loughborough was the place to go to, and I decided in my head that that was the only place I was going to. And to get into Loughborough, you had to sort of travel down in your England blazers and things like that. Well, I'd only played for North of England at rugby. So I got down, I knew straight away I wasn't going to make it. And my old man was like, "What are you going to do with yourself now?" And I thought, I don't know. And you know what? I want to do sport. I'm not going to be good enough to do it as a rugby player. I'm only going to be playing like at the level of Sale and people like that. So I'm not going to play internationally. So I'll try and do something that I quite enjoy. So at that time, there weren't many male physios. So there was a real shortage of physios and it was very hard to get in. And people now talk about sex discrimination, about getting into football and things like that. It was the same in physio. And there were 24 physio schools and only 4 would take male physios. And I applied to Salford, got in. There was 8 fellas, 16 girls, and that's how my career started, really. And I always wanted to go into sport. Did the NHS for a couple of years. Enjoyed it, but it was ticking boxes to get where I wanted to go. And then when I was 26, I got offered the head of physio job at a hospital in Bolton, private hospital. I wanted to set up a sports injury clinic. So I used to travel. We used to work on the NHS in the day, get a train from Victoria to Lostock, and then run up to Bolton to start work at 6 at night, get the last train back at 10. Did that 4 days a week just to get the clinic going. And then I moved to a place not too far from where you are, Warney, out at Crank in Fairfield.
Oh yeah.
It's a Fairfield hospital. And it was sponsored by Wilkinson's Glass. They basically headhunted me and asked if I'd like to go there and set up a rehab unit. And I just left Lee Rugby to go to Wigan, which fitted in perfect because I could get over the tops from the back of Crank to get into Wigan Rugby. So Wigan Rugby, I was there 2-3 days a week, and then Saturdays and then match day. So I was doing a full-time job plus 3 evening sessions, a Saturday session and a Sunday game. So you can imagine it was pretty intense, but I loved it. It was just what I wanted to do. And Fairfield were brilliant. They basically gave me a massive area and just kit it out as you want. And I started out there, and I had 2 or 3 good years there. while doing Wigan rugby and everything else, and it fitted in well with both situations. So really, I started off working at Wigan. So that would have been what, 88. I left Lee. Sorry, no, it'd be later than that. It'd be 1990. So I was at Lee from 86 to 90. Then I went to Wigan. Somehow I got the international job. I don't know how, but I did when I was at Lee. Like Lee, for those of you who don't follow rugby league, they were near the bottom of the league. And I applied for the Great Britain job thinking no chance of getting it because the big clubs were obviously going to put their physios in. Somehow I got it. And the head coach at the time, Malcolm Riley, didn't want me. He had his own physio who wasn't qualified, but the rugby league needed somebody that had a bit of medical credentials behind them rather than the sponge man. So I got the job alongside my lead job. Don't know how I got it, but I did. And then I did the French game over in Perpignan. And within a week, they rang me and said, we'd like to come on tour with the Lions. So I went away for 16 weeks.
Wow.
And there was me and a doc, Mal Riley, the coach, Lammy will know him, obviously,
Yeah.
Phil Larder. And we went out to Papua New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand for 4 months. 32 lads, me. At that time, there was no masters, there was no fitness coaches. I was just doing the lot in the middle of nowhere in Papua New Guinea. That is a place to go. And then going to Australia and New Zealand. So I did it, came back. I'd loved it. My mum said, I went away a boy, came back a man. I really enjoyed it. Came straight home, said to my ex-wife at that time, I went, just to let you know, I'm going again in 2 years if they ask me. So I went again 2 years later, and then I went again 2 years after that. So I did it 3 times, and you're away from home. You know, they talk about now with the World Cup with them being away for 6 to 8 weeks. We were away 14 weeks, so 3.5 months. You didn't have mobiles then. That shows you how long ago. So it'd be what, 1992 and 94.
Right.
So I loved it. It was a great life because you were away, 32 lads. You got paid on a Thursday. They were paying my mortgage back home. You ended up with about 250 cash in your pocket, but you were working so much you never spent any. Come back, made more money doing that than working properly. So I did that, and then went back to Fairfield, and then I got a phone call one day from Brian Kidd, and Kiddo had spoke to a couple of people who knew me and said, "Look, we want to bring a player up." So you might not remember him, Warney, but a lad called David Johnson, who's Brennan Johnson's dad.
Oh, yeah.
So Jono was like Man United centre forward. He'd done his cruciate playing for England, and he'd been playing for England. Typical Jono, he's a character, and he'd gone to beat the keeper, gone round the keeper. Keeper had gone down. Instead of rolling the ball into the net, stood on the ball, waited for the keeper to get back up so he could take the mickey out of him, and then the keeper just wiped him out. Did his cruciate, and so the physio at the time at United, Jim McGregor, had said he was fit to play. Kiddo wasn't convinced, so they brought him up to see me. I was doing remember the Cybex RKD we had at Blackburn?
Do I
I'm
ever?
sure you do. Yeah. So Jono came in, I tested him, and he was 6 months post-op, and he was a million miles off. And I went to Kiddo, don't play him. I said, it's just too risky, because he was like a prospectively good player for him. And that was it. And then that happened, and then about 8 weeks later, I got a phone call again from Kiddo and said, there's a job going at Man U. And I said, no, but I love rugby. Rugby's my sport, what I want to do. He said, look, why don't you come and do the interview? And I went home and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what I could do here? I could swing this to my advantage. Because if I get offered the Man U job, I can go to the chairman at Wigan and go, I don't want to go to Man U. I want to go full-time here. I was only doing five sessions a week. So I went along for my interview, and I thought, I won't get offered it anyway. And going to the gaffer's office, I'm sat there with him, and 20 minutes in, I realised he's offering me the job. I thought, shit, this ain't working as I wanted it to. This is going to be a nightmare. And we were meant to be flying to Brisbane on the Saturday to play in the World Club Challenge. They rang me that night and said, look, we want to offer the Man U job. I thought, shit, what do I do now? So I rang Jack Robinson, who was chairman at Wigan. I said, can I see you tomorrow? And he went, yeah. So I rang a couple of other people up, I rang Mal Riley because even though he'd not wanted me in the first instance, within 2 weeks, he was brilliant with me. He was spot on. But it took him 2 weeks for me to win him over. And I rang him up and I rang Maurice Lindsay, who was chairman of Wigan and the rugby league at that time, and said, I've been offered this job. It's not quite what I want to do because I want to go full time at Wigan. Um, and Maurice Lindsay said to me, God rest his soul, he said, can't believe you're saying that. He said, if you're an actor, where would you want to go? I said, well, probably New York, and work over there. And said, well, if you're a physio, where's you better be? Wigan Rugby or Man United? Don't make sense. You'd be better going to Man U. So I went to see Jack Robbie, and he just turned around on me and he said I was letting the club down by wanting to leave Wigan. Do you realise we've got a big game in the World Club Challenge on Saturday in Brisbane? And we're going over there like in a couple of days. I'll never get this chance again. It's something I need to do. So I did it. He went in the local Wigan paper, hammered me for letting the club down. And I had to put that to one side. I mean, to be fair, luckily for me, they went over to Brisbane and won and became World Club champions. I think it's the only time, Lammy might correct me, where a British team's gone to Australia and won the World Club Challenge. So I missed out on that trip, but at the same time, took the Man U job. And went in there with a bit of trepidation because I wasn't a football man.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Kiddo, and Kiddo said, look, is there anybody I can go and see who might be able to give me like an insight of how it works? He said, I'll put you into somebody. So I went over to South Manchester, a guy called Steve Fleet, who was like Man City's academy head director at that stage. And he was brilliant with me. I spent a day with him and he really put me in the picture as to where it was. So I just rang the gaffer back and went, yeah, I'm coming. I fancy it. And I went in and never looked back. So I sold my soul from rugby to go and work in football. And here I am 30 odd years later, still in it. But at that time, so you're going to Man U at that time. So you look at the situation now with City, where they've got a bus for staff and a bus for players now. There was me, there was one other physio, Rob Swire. We had a masseur who was a part-time singer in a nightclub. We had a dietitian that was there 2 days a week, and a doctor who came in 2 afternoons a week, and that was it. And that was Man United. And I'd come from rugby league, and I'm going, wow, this is a million miles off what I thought. But in a way, it worked to my advantage because you suddenly thought whatever you do now it's going to be better than what it is. So my first day there, Gaffer says, come, let's have a look around the gym and see what you think. And they just had some brand new training kit put in. So I walked round it, looked round it. It was all very nice. Force gym equipment, I can remember it, red and black. And they'd had a new leg extension, a groin adductor machine and so on. So Gaffer turned to me, my first day there, and he said, what do you think? I went, I'll be honest, Gaffer, it's not for me. He said, what do you mean? We've just spent 20 grand on this, which at that time was a lot of cash. I said, nah, give us 500 quid. I said, I get some boxing pads, some gloves, some mitts, speed balls, that type of thing in. So it's 500 quid. Yeah, just get it. Because if you look at the machines, everything you bought is pulling the weight towards you. Well, that never happens. Mark Hughes is pushing people away. You've not got anything here that involves pushing away, which is what you need. And he went, oh, I never thought of that. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm not being funny. This is not rocket science. That's what, I've been working in rugby league. That's what rugby league was all about. And so he gave me 500 quid. So there was a company in Liverpool. They were called Alex Sports, they were called. And I rang them up and they came and fitted it out for us. Anyway, my first week there, Harold on the car park pulls me and he goes, Davy, you better get in the gaffer's office. He is not happy. What's up? I said, that work you've had done yesterday. I thought, well, he's passed it all. I've got the money for it. So I go in the office, knock on the door. And as soon as I opened it, he opens it. Get in that fucking gym and go and have a look what you've done. So I go in. The speed balls are up, the bags are up. And I'm thinking, that's fine. So I go back and say, Gaffer, I can't see what you're on about. I thought he's winding me up here. So I knock on the door again, and he goes, are you sure you've looked properly? I went, yeah. So I go in and have another look. And I'm thinking, is it in the wrong colours? So is it green and white like Celtic colours, which obviously would have gone down worse, or City colours or Liverpool, whatever it was. So I look, nice, red, black and white, as I asked. Everything's spot on. So I go in, Gaffer, I'm missing a trick here. I'll come with you. So he frog marches me down into the gym. And little did I realise that across the front of all the punch bags, the company had put their name on it, Alex, right across the front of the bag. And I thought, "Oh my God, no." And he looked at the bag and he pointed at it with big white letters. I said, "I tell you what though, Gaffer, they'll knock the living daylights out of them bags." The lads loved it. So you can imagine Scholesy and Butty, and they were only young lads then. And it worked out well. But no, I was lucky because at that time, again, some of the listeners might remember, but some of the top players, Lammy will know, Elry Hanley and Martin Offiah, Sean Edwards, who was obviously with the French team at the minute, they were all the top players. But they used to go out in Manchester and then they'd mix with Incy and Giggsy and so on. And so it made it easy for me because they'd heard from the lads that I'm coming in. And my first day there, Incy pulls me and he says, I've heard from Martin some good things. I went, "Oh, that's good news." He said, "So just to let you know, though, I'm the governor in the medical room," he said to me. I said, "Are you?" I said, "Well, I would say, looking out on that pitch, you're the governor out there and I'm the governor in here." So he turned around to me and he went, "Well, you got a bit of spunk about you." I went, "Yeah, yeah. I'm just happy to start, man." And I got on well with him. He was
That's good. Yeah.
like any player, in it. Once you win him over, it's fine. But yeah, but that's how it started. And I said to the gaffer, "Why did you?" I'm not being funny. I'm not a football fan. He went, "Well, we've not employed you for that." He said, "We've heard you're pretty good at what you do." And I said, "Well, that's very nice to hear." I said, "So hopefully, like I always have done and still do now, I'll put 110% in," and loved every minute of it. It was quality.
So how
But we
much?
had no staff warning. That's how it was.
Yeah, but how much difference do you see from, obviously you're still in football now and you're working now,
Yeah.
and you talk about that situation behind the scenes, but what was your job on a day-to-day basis then? Because you talked about there being almost a jack of all trades doing everything,
Yeah.
but a
That's
physio's
what you
job
had
is
to be,
completely
really.
different, isn't it?
No, that's how it was. It was, you went in, we didn't have Lammies of the world or Tony Strudwicks or Howdies of the world. So your job was that fitness side. So it was me and Kiddo. And me and Kiddo would speak every day on the phone at home, at work and so on. And again, all the way through to the treble year. Again, it was the same thing when Steve McLaren came in as assistant manager when Kiddo left. And it was exactly the same people from when I started to when I finished. It didn't change. And the structure of the club didn't change and the players got used to it. And it did create the odd problem as we started to bring in more international players. The English players wasn't a problem, the Butties, the Scholesies, the Bexies of the world, David Mays, that type of. They knew that's how the structure was. But then when we started bringing in a couple of external players, not players who didn't know those values, that was the way Manchester did it. And I remember when Jordi Cruyff came in, Jordi was used to having a physio for every player at Barcelona. And in the first couple of days, he was moaning away, and Maisie had to like pull him and go, "Jordi, this is how we do it at Man U. If you're not happy, fuck off." And that's basically how the lads tried to pull him in line that way. And he had to understand that's the way Manchester United did it. We were going to sign Edgar Davids at one time, and he wanted to bring his own physio, and the gaffer went, "Nah, it's not happening. This is the structure. This is the way the club is run. And if you're not bigger than this club," so we never signed him. Because he wanted to bring his own personal physio in. So the gaffer was brilliant that way.
So, David, in those days, in terms of actually doing your job, what were the big challenges for you? In terms of you're a bit of a one-man band, you're doing a little bit of everything. There's loads going on. You're in the dominant team of the 90s. Excuse me. What were the challenges?
So my view's always been, and it's the same at United, Blackburn, Chelsea, Burnley, wherever I've been. I always think in the first team dressing room there are 5 key players, and if you win them 5 over, the rest of them will follow. So my key thing in there, looking at that dressing room, obviously Brucey was a big one in that situation. Peter Schmeichel was a big one. Keano was a big one. Then looking at Dennis Irwin, because Dennis was a senior player, even though he was a quiet voice, everybody respected Dennis in that situation. And then I'd always keep a float on. So obviously when Incy was there, Incy was a big player. And if you didn't get on with Incy, you weren't going to tick it. So that's the way I looked at it. If I can win those 5 over, then that was the big one. It's the same at Blackburn. the important people that were in that situation. It was important to win over the right ones. And I've never changed that situation wherever I ended up going. Chelsea was the same. You can imagine the Chelsea lot. There was obviously some big hitters there. And again, it was just picking out the ones that that drove the rest of the players forward, really.
So when
So
you
that
when
was
you
my
say that,
challenge.
Dave, what are you trying to win them over with? What are you trying to sort of to do to prove to them that you're the main man and you're good enough to be there?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of understanding the way I want to work, the way the time punctuality and timekeeping is massive. There's no time when we're finishing. If you're going to be there till 5 o'clock, we need to be there till 5 o'clock. We have to respect that some of the junior staff, they have to be respected. We don't try and diss them. I've had a couple of senior players try and take the mickey out of junior staff. Whoa, hang on a minute. If you've got any axe to grind, come and see me. Don't be taking it out on the junior physios or whatever. So in that situation, it was important for me to put that marker in. But at the same time, it was some players need an arm round and they need a bit of protection. Other players just don't take the piss out of us because we're here to help. And I, in return, expect the staff to be a situation where they're not over friendly with players. So my view is that you should always sit in the middle. So you should sit between the players and the manager. If you get too tight to the manager, the lads don't trust you. If you get too tight to the players, the manager doesn't trust you. So it's important to win that challenge over. And I think just probably listening like most of, like you two have always been, it's about hard work and that ethos of working hard. There's no time schedule. You're not there for 40 hours a week. That's how the world's changing now. Everybody's expecting a day off in the week now. And it just
Yeah,
never, they don't want to be in on the Sunday, and
yeah,
it's
true.
like, well, that's how it is. It's just normal.
Yeah.
And so
When you
that was a
talk
big
about that
thing.
though, Dave, when you talk about that being in the middle, did you learn the hard way or something? What made you realize that you wanted to be in the middle and that was the right place, or was it just you just thought that's the best place to position myself?
I'd always been in that because there was a guy, my mentor was a guy called Dennis Wright, who was head physio at Wigan at the time. And that was, he taught me those morals, and that's the way it should be. And a bit like we all are with, my dad always was that similar thing in that situation. My dad always said to me, he said, you get on and do football. He said, but I never want you to ever hear you breaking a contract to go somewhere else. So if you've got a time scale, you've got to see it out. And my dad always and I always stuck with that value because I had chances to do other things and go back to clubs and so on. And I would never do it because my dad told me, you sign 3 years, you do 3 years, not 2 years and 6 months. That's the way I was brought up. So that was always that ethos. But I think my other challenge was because I come from rugby league, to come into football, you can imagine there was one or two going, yeah, but you don't really understand the game. But I think at that time, because rugby league was so far ahead of football in terms of rehab, it made my life easy. It was so easy in that situation. And people always surprised at that. Going to Chelsea, when I went to Chelsea, exactly the same thing. I've gone in, and it was a difficult time. Thomas Tuchel had left and Graham had just come in, Graham Potter. There were lots of players before I went in. There were lots of players breaking down, which is why I got offered the job at the time I did. And people would come up to me and go, "Oh, how are you finding the challenge? It must be really hard." I went, mate, easiest job I've ever had. Just about organising, structuring it, getting some respect from the players. And you've got everything at your feet. So instead of having a Man United where you've got two staff, I'm at Chelsea and I've got 16 staff on the first team. And how you juggle those 16. But it was easy, honestly. That it's just common sense a lot of the time. I don't think there's anything special about it. I don't see it that way anyway.
So when you talk about I was going to ask you about the difference between the mentality of rugby players compared to football players, because often I see some of the rugby boys and I think, how are you running with that type of injury that you've got? What is the difference in mentality, or is the one at all?
I think there's a bit of sometimes when in the rugby players, it was a bit of not naivety, but in terms of rugby league's a tough game. It's a hard game, and they've had to work hard to get where they are. And in that situation, it was a battle a lot of the time for them. And you have to remember, Wonnie, that if they don't play, they don't get paid. So a lot of
Really?
those, yeah. So a lot of those players were in that situation. And again, Lammy knows what what I've said before, but like working at EFL 1 and 2 in the last few years, when I was up at Barrow, again, we've got players there, like we've got young lads, and if they're not in the squad for Saturday, it can make a difference of like double the wages. They'll be on £200 a week, and if they're in the first team squad. So when I used to go in at Barrow on a Thursday, like there hardn't any injuries because they all wanted to be available to play on Saturday because they were on double money. And that's how rugby league was. We'd have the chairman coming in 20 minutes before the game, playing St. Helens. He'd come in and say to the lads, win today, there's a grand extra each in cash. And the lads were ready to knock people out. And, there's no way you were stopping them, Warning, whatever, they were going to do it. But then the release, once they'd won trophies, was very different. They would proper, go for it afterwards because I think they charged themselves up so much. And it was such an intense game, to get players to come off with any sort of injury was very difficult.
That's incredible, that, because I never really knew that about rugby players, that they were basically
Yeah.
contracted to pay as you play, really,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah.
Sorry,
And we had a similar, when you think like when Rocky Santa Cruz came to Blackburn, Rocky was telling us in Germany, if they don't, at that time, they had to take out their own insurance. And if they didn't play after 6 weeks, they had to claim off their insurance rather than the clubs pay them. So he was at Bayern Munich for 6 years before he came to Blackburn and played 30 games in 6 years. So you can imagine that for Rocky was obviously he knew that better than any player. But
Dave, just on that, in that position that you place yourself in the midpoint between the players and the manager, that's a difficult balancing act sometimes, isn't it? And sometimes you can get it wrong a little bit. Were there any times that you had disagreements either from the player to the manager or the manager to the player between whether or not a player was injured enough to miss a game, or were there any moments where it became politically difficult for you?
I worked out before we did this thing that I've had 34 managers in football. And I think with every manager, touch wood, I've never had a situation where I've not got on with them. And I've listened to a couple of things like all the managers I've worked with have been really good to work for. Now, whether it's just because I've been lucky with breaks or whatever, I'm not sure. I think I had 10 in rugby I've worked out as well. So that's 44 different managers. And I think in that situation, you get a situation where you pick up their strengths and their weaknesses. And from that point of view, you can soon tag into that. Now, from that point of view, my view of the injuries is twofold. It's important for me to prove to the player, if they're not fit, they're not fit. So let's say on a Friday morning, I'm taking them outside. I'm going to test them to the point that, let's say I'm taking Warney out on a Friday. I'd have to do enough to prove to Warney that the lad who's going to be running against him, he's not going to be able to cope with it because of the injury. So if we then walk back in and the gaffer stood by the tunnel, and he won't talk to me, he'll talk to Warney first. He'll go, "What do you reckon, Warney? How did it go?" "Yeah, Dave's tried this with me and it didn't work." And then he'll come to me and he'll go. So effectively, it's a 2-1 vote then. So if I can get the player on my side. Now, some players won't give me the full facts and they'll go out. And if they're mentally tough enough to do it, and they say, "Yeah, I'll be fine, I'll cope with it," and then I'll throw my 2 pence in, I might get outvoted. But if I've not convinced the player is not right, then there's a 2-1 vote that way. And I've always worked it that way, where it's, look, Gaffer, he's telling you he's all right. I've done everything I can possibly do, me against him, one-on-one. Let's go with it. But then at the same time, there's been players where I know that they're not mentally strong. And I've seen I won't give you the name of the player, but let's say it was Gail Givet. Lammy, you know what he's like.
Wow.
I'm not sure whether Warney remembers him. But Gail Givet, mate, he would play with a broken leg, wouldn't he, Lammy? He was unbelievable. Now, I can think of certainly one, possibly 2 players we had at Blackburn that I would have gone, nah, any slight niggle, don't play him, because they'll be waving over at the touchline to get him off. And I said to the gaffer, look, it's too risky. If he's got any slight, don't play him. So I think it's a matter of knowing your players. And I think sometimes we've got a danger sometimes. You guys have worked with Doc Robertson, and you know what Duncan's like. And he was always into the scans. And I can remember Scott Dan, we had a midweek game, and Duncan scanned him, and he's gone, yeah, he's got He's got a grade 1 calf strain. Now, I know what Danzy's like. Danzy will play through anything. Danzy come to me and he went, Dava, seriously, mate, I can play with this. I'll be fine. So I took him out, did everything I could with him. Not a problem. Dava, I'm all right. I'm fine with this. Go back in, Doc. I'm not being funny, but ignore the scan. Danzy's all right. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I trust him. When I went to the gaffer, I said, look, gaffer, ignore the scan. Play him. He'd be fine. Danzy, and he did. He played the full game. And it was a grade 1 strain that probably Danzy had 10 times over before. But you could trust him. Nelly would be another one. But then I can think of other players where you couldn't do that. It's just not worth the risk. So I think you just got to be smart and understand that and understand the players, and then you can tick that off.
Well, I remember we played Everton on the opening game of the season, and on the Friday before it, I felt my abductor go on the top of my thigh. And I remember you saying to me, right, let's get you in the physio room. And we literally were in the physio room for about 3 hours trying to like work it out. And you were doing your work on it. And the next morning we did a run at Goodison and we did some work early on in the day. And you were just like, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, absolutely fine. And in my head, I was thinking, you wouldn't let me go on the pitch if you didn't think this was doable. And I played the 90 minutes, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it was sore, but it was absolutely fine. You get through it, and that's part and parcel of it. But I think that's again a relationship that I mean, I didn't know you before I went to Blackburn, but straight away my first impressions, and obviously I knew of you and what you'd done in the game and where you'd been. I was like, God, this is good. This is like a relationship that you need, and this is one that you can trust and you understand. So, yeah, I think it's vitally important that you trust your physio. But again, like you say there, from a player's point of view, you've got to want to do it as well, haven't you? You've got to want to play in that game. So that's a huge part of it as well.
I think one of the things is that let me give you another story. So when Graham Souness was manager at Blackburn, so we had Andy Cole was playing for us, and I knew Coley. I'd worked with Coley, and Coley needs to get your trust. No, did you have him at Newcastle, Lammy?
No, well before my time.
No. Yeah, anyway, I obviously knew Coley from United, and Coley's quite quiet till he gets to know you, and then when he gets to know you, he's really, really... And when he first came to the club, I remember having a fallout with Craig Short once, because when we went to pre-season, I said, look, we need to take Coley on his own for the first few days. He couldn't do Phil Bosma's plodding around the pitch stuff. I said, you'll just lose him. So the gaffer, to be fair, was good, and I took him. And Shorty came in after 2 or 3 days, and Shorty pulled me, and he went, Davra, I'm not having this. Fucking players doing their own thing with you and doing... So, Shorty, you'll probably learn as you get older that sometimes you have to manage play. No, I'm not having it. We should all be doing it together. We should all be slogging pre-season. And me and Shorty had a proper fallout. And I went, look, I know Coley. I know what he's like. If we want to get the best out of him, if he wants to score us goals to keep us in this league, we need to look after him. So me and Coley ignored it, gone on with it. Shorty, and I'm big mates with Shorty now, and it's not a problem. Anyway, 6 months into the season, Coley had a bit of a tight hamstring, and he'd missed a game. So went on a Friday, we're playing Arsenal on the Saturday, and Dean Saunders was our striker coach. So Dino pulls him in. He went, Davry says, what about Coley tomorrow? I said, look, I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. We've got a game on Tuesday, so there's 2 ways we do it. Are you going to start him? He said, well, I don't know what the gaffer's thinking. I think there's a fair chance he'll be on the bench. I said, look, for me, if that's going to be the case, then you leave him here. Paul Kelly, my number 2, will look after him. We're in Sunday, and then he'll be fit for Tuesday. So I said, if you're not, why take him all the way to Arsenal? Because at that time, we were on the bus all the time. Why take him all the way to Arsenal? You sit him on the bench. He'll be as moody as anything. You'll bring him on with 10 minutes to go, and he won't move. And then we've got to drag him back, having had a tight hamstring. There's no point. But if you're going to start him, then we'll take him, and we can work on him on Friday, and he'll be fine. So just let me know. So I walk across the canteen at Blackburn when we were down the bottom, and as soon as I walked across, I heard this shout behind me, and it was Suey. And he went, I'm not fucking having that. So, when somebody's talking behind your back and you know it's aimed at you, I knew, and the lads are all laughing because they knew I was going to get chewed up. So I've turned around and I said, you talking to me? Went, yeah, I'm not having a fucking physio telling me what to do about who I'm picking, who I'm not picking. So I didn't say anything. I walked back to him and said, look, Graham, it's not a conversation to have here. I said, but I want to give him my advice to Dino. And it's the advice I've given to Dino Whether you take it or not, that's your choice. You're the gaffer, but that's just my advice. That's all I gave the answer to. I'm not telling you should pick. So he carried on. I said, look, let's not have this conversation here. So I walked back into the treatment room. Anyhow, Coley comes in and he's laughing away. Said, I've got you in the shit. I said, no, mate, it's fine. I've just told the gaffer what we should do. He said, what am I doing? I went, you're training. Just go out and train. Let's see how you get on. So he goes out and we were down at the bottom end of Brockle. We were where the academy was when you two were there.
Yeah.
So Coley's gone out to train and I'm getting my bags to go out and cover training. As I'm doing that, Coley's done the warm-up and he's walking in. I thought, oh, no, he's felt his hammy. Last thing I need. So I come over and Coley comes in, big smile on his face. Are you all right? He says, yeah, Gaffer's decided to leave me here. He's going to let Kells run me on the Saturday. You come in Sunday, look after me, and I'm going to play Tuesday. Graham never mentioned it. And I was, ever since then, whenever I've seen him, he's never mentioned it at all.
Really?
And yeah, and he never turned around and went, you're right, Davor, we should have kept him here. And that's how serious he was. Graham, he's a great guy to work for. I really enjoy work. At the time, it was challenging. And I love the challenge. I love the challenge of working against him because he's that big personality, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And we had some interesting battles over our time. I can give you another story. Listen, this is another one. So we were going to sign a lad called Lucien Matomo, who was a French centre half. He played for Saint Etienne, and me and the doc did a medical on him, and he was a million miles off it. His knee was all over the show, and he'd been playing. Alan Murray, who was the chief scout, had said, "Yeah, he's been playing with a bandage on his knee for the last sort of like 6 to 8 weeks." So anyway, do the medical. The agent says he's fine. We do his isokinetic testing. He's way off. We get an MR done, and his cruciate's hanging by a thread. So I turned to me and the doc went, yeah, we can't sign him. So we refused to sign him. So Graham wasn't very happy that we weren't going to sign this guy. And he was like the size of Koulibaly, this lad. He was a big lad. So anyway, 2 weeks later, we were playing West Brom away. I can remember it. We get a phone call from the gaffer, come to my room now. So we got to the room. And he went, I've just heard Middlesbrough have done a medical on him and passed him. So he said, do you two clowns know what you're doing? I said, well, this is where we're at. We've done our assessment. We're not happy. We can't get insurance on it because we refuse to accept it that he's the right player. So Graham, like, proper give us earache. Didn't speak to us properly for the next few days. Anyhow, nothing developed. Middlesbrough never signed him. So I just thought, I'll keep that under my wrap. Never. A week later, he pulls me in the dock again. He went, get in here, you two. What's up? He said, Everton have just had a look at Matomo. They're going to sign him. He's had a medical. He's passed it. So that's Middlesbrough and Everton. Yes, but why did Middlesbrough not sign him then? So he said, don't know. But anyway, Everton never signed him. He went back to Saint Etienne. And on the Monday, after he gone back to Saint Etienne, he'd played on the Saturday. The doc rings me and he went, Davor, where are you? I said, oh, I'm just on my way home. He said, you're not going to believe this. Matomo's been stretchered off.
Shut up.
Wow.
I go in the treatment room the next day. Graham comes in. He went, I suppose you've heard. I went, heard about what? I thought, I'll play stupid here. So Graham's there and he's going, Lucien Matomo, what? He's injured. He's done his knee in. All right. It couldn't be his other knee, could it? I went, seriously, Gaffer, you're grasping at straws there, aren't you? I said, we've just saved the club $5.5 million, which at that time will probably be 50 million now. John Williams was like over the moon, like, and that was it. And you can see it that both clubs had failed. We failed him. Middlesbrough and Everton were telling everybody he was all right. He's gone back to Saint Etienne and then snapped his cruciate. And then he signed for Man City 2 years later, played 5 games in 2 years for him. So you can imagine a club like Blackburn, that would have been a nightmare for them. So, yeah, so that was interesting from there. But hey, that's where it is.
So we've
probably diverting now.
We've sort of moved on to talking a bit about Blackburn there. So from Man United, you've won the treble, 99, and then you've chosen to move to Blackburn. What brought that about, Dave, and why?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so at that time, I'd had a phone call about 3 weeks before from Brian Kidd, had obviously gone to Blackburn, and John Williams had rang me and said, Kiddo wants you to come in as head physio at Blackburn. So I went to meet him and Tom Finn. Again, I don't think you two would have been at Blackburn when Tom Finn was secretary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I met Tom and John at Tom's house and said, look, let's look at it this way. I said, if United win the treble, I'll come. If United don't win the treble, I'm staying at United. And they went, all right, we'll go with it. And Kiddo was brilliant. He was like, look, if that's what Dave wants to do, that's the way I'm going to do it. So we win the league, we beat Tottenham, and then we win the FA Cup, beating Newcastle, so we've won the double. And I thought, oh shit, this is getting a bit too tight, this. So on the Monday, I said to the gaffer, can I have a meeting with you on the Friday? He said, well, I need you on the Friday, whatever happens, because we're going to sign Mark Bosnich, so you need to do a medical. So I said, that's great. So I thought, oh, great, I've got that boxed off. And one of my tightest relationships at that time was with Peter Schmeichel. And me and Pete, like, we always used to sit opposite each other on the bus and what have you. And we went for a coffee and he's chatting. Pete was leaving. He was going to Portugal at the end of the season. And he's chatting to me. He said, what are you doing? Because your contract's up at the end of the season. I said, I know it is. I said, the gaffer's told me I'll be all right. I said, but something else has cropped up. I said, Kiddo's coming for me at Blackburn. But I've said, I'm only going to go if they win the treble. And I said, I've arranged a meeting on the Friday. And Pete said, Dave, you got to do what's right for you. And at that time, my two youngest kids had both just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So it was a difficult time for me personally in terms of having to be for them, because there were obviously issues there that I needed to deal with. And we win the treble, don't we? So with a minute to go on that night, I'm staying at United. And then Teddy and Ollie score, put the cat amongst the pigeons, and I'm going in on Thursday we get back, Friday I go in, meeting with the gaffer at 8 o'clock in the morning, knock on his door, give him a letter. So he said, you're very clever. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, your contract's up, so obviously we're going to sort that out for you now. He said, and you probably have to more staff and you want more kit and you want this. I said, no, gaffer, just read this letter, will you? So he opens it up, starts to look at it, and he's going, you want to resign? I said, yeah. I said, I've only got 3 weeks to go on my contract. He said, you know you're getting a new contract. It's all sorted. I said, well, it hasn't been yet because we haven't sorted out anything about it. I said, but there are other reasons why. And he stopped and he went, don't tell me you're going with Kiddo. Because him and Kiddo, obviously that was a difficult conversation for Kiddo when he left. So I said, look, Gaffer, it works well for me. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, you know about my kids. So he said, it's not a problem. He said, tell you what we'll do. He said, we'll relocate you. We'll get you a house near Carrington, because we were moving to Carrington then. So I said, nah. I said, kids are at a good school. I said, I need to be nearer them. I need to be in that situation. So he said, no, we can't have this. He said, tell you what we'll do. The club will get you a district nurse, and she can come in and do all your injections for you. And I went, no, my kid's my responsibility. I don't want to think about it in years to come. And he went, I'll tell you what we'll do then. We can get around this. He said, how about you do the injections in the morning, drive to Carrington from where you live, which was Blackburn. And then as soon as you got to go home, just go home. I went, no, seriously. I said, so on a Wednesday when we're playing Juventus in the Champions League and you want to know if Roy's fit or Ronnie Johnson or whatever, and you turn to 4 o'clock and you go, where's Dave? Oh, he's gone home to do his injection. That doesn't work for Man United. It works for Dave Fevre, but not. I don't want to do it. I said, no, I made my mind up. I said, I'm going to take the Blackburn offer. And he went, no, I'll tell you what, go and do Mark Bosnich's medical and we'll have another chat in 2 hours. I said, my decision won't be any different. And I went away and did that, came back. Gaffer, what do you think? Gaffer, I've made my mind up. And he was great on that, not a problem. Anyway, 8 weeks later, Kiddo gets sacked. First person to ring me was the gaffer. Davy, all right? Yeah, I'm fine. He said, why don't you come back? He said, we haven't filled your job and everything else. I said, no, I've signed for 3 years. My dad always told me stay for 3 years, so I'm not going to do it. So he put his phone down. And then in the January, Tony Parks had been manager and we were lost at Barnsley 5-1, not to make the playoffs. And Per Franson scored for us. I can remember that. And on the Sunday, I went to watch Man U Arsenal with the consultant orthopedic surgeon I'd worked with at Man U. He invited me there for dinner and the game. And we went down to the gaffer's room to have a drink. And the gaffer sees me come in, pulls me, takes me in the room. He says, Davry says, you're not going to make the playoffs now, are you? I said, no. So I said, he said, come back, your job's still here. I went, Gaffer, I've still got 2.5 years to do yet. I can't jump out of this. You know I can't. And that's the way he was, and it was brilliant. He's always been like that. He was just top guy to work for. long as you worked hard, he was great with you. Never had a crossword with him. Never had a fallout with him. Nothing.
So you've just told that story there, but there's one thing that stuck out to me when you were telling it.
Go on.
You said at one point you were staying if they hadn't have scored that goal.
Yeah.
So would you have stayed? What would have happened?
Yeah, I would have done, because I just felt, do you know in your career where you think, we can't do any better than this. We can't do any better than winning the treble. And with this medical team we had and the squad we had, and it was only going to happen, as a one-off. We'd won the double a couple of years before, so to win the league and the cup, when Cantona scored against Liverpool, with the green and white shirts to win the double, and we'd already done that, so it wasn't achieved anymore.
I don't know what you're on about.
I know what you're on about, Dave.
Hey, mate, worst game ever.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. But anyway, it was one of them things where I just thought, I can't achieve any more here. The worst thing was that I'd spent 2 years designing Carrington, and when I was leaving in the July, and they were opening Carrington in the September, and Bobby Charlton rang me when they were doing the official opening, and he went, "Dave, you're going to come to the opening?" And I went, "No, I'm not coming." "What do you mean? You spent 2 years?" I went all over the world looking at things to set it up. I went, Bobby said, "Look at it this way." I said, "It's like me having a Porsche on my drive and not having the keys to drive it. Why do I want to look at something that I'm not going to work at? So I don't want to come." And I didn't go for 10 years to Carrington. Just didn't want to go. Didn't feel right. So yeah, it is. But that was it, and that's why I left United. So it was a personal thing. It was family. It wasn't the club. The club were excellent, and it was the right thing to do. And I look back, and people say, you missed out on a few years with the Fergie and what have you. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it that having worked with 33 other managers, I've learned so much more. I'm a better physio for having worked with them 33 than if I'd just worked with Fergie for so many years. I've seen the majority of stuff from Fergie's point of view. And don't get me wrong, like everybody, like every physio, there's good things and bad things. And in that sense, I wasn't going to learn any more. And I learned more from working with Graham and Sam and everybody else from there. So that's why I did it. Best thing I ever did.
I think that's a really good way to end the episode, if I'm being completely honest. I think
all right, mate.
Brilliant story. Absolutely love them stories that you've got, and I'm sure we're going to hear more in part 2. So yeah, we'll hold it there for the next part. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow.